Well, good morning, folks. Delighted to be here at the Calgary Stampede, joined by the premiers of the Northwest Territories, Saskatchewan, Ontario, and New Brunswick, as we prepare for this week's Council of the Federation starting tonight in Saskatoon. I want to welcome all of my colleagues here as we did at this morning's pancake breakfast, and delighted we got them white-hatted and suited up, and they'll be headed over to catch a bit of the rodeo this afternoon to celebrate a bit of our Western heritage here in Alberta. We just finished a very productive discussion about how to be stronger partners in prosperity, to serve the citizens of our respective provinces, to strengthen national unity and national economic development by pursuing global access for Canadian resources through responsible resource development. All of these provinces and territories are very strong supporters of getting national economic corridors built from both east to west and north to south, including pipelines, so we can get Canadian energy to global markets to compete with and hopefully displace energy that comes from some of the world's worst regimes. We talked about sharing information on how more strongly to advocate for responsible resource development, and we've also talked about, we also shared notes on how to more strongly defend our taxpayers, particularly with respect to the federal carbon tax threats. We will hope for very strong language coming out of the Council of the Federation, underscoring our support for economic corridors, not just for oil and gas, but for hydroelectricity, for rail, for roadways, and other ways that we can share our prosperity from coast to coast. We are going to compare notes on how much opportunity and how many jobs have been lost as a result of investment leaving Canada because of constraints to resource development and our resource sector. And so we'll be comparing notes on that. We also had some very constructive discussions on promoting free trade within Canada. I think we all share the frustration that there are more barriers to trade within the 28 countries of the European Union, within Canada than there are within the 28 countries of the European Union. And we've discussed some strategies that we'll be carrying on in Saskatoon about how to advance internal trade within Canada and easier mobility for people, including professionals and tradespeople from coast to coast. All five of these jurisdictions were strongly opposed to recent policies like Bills C-69 and C-48. I want to thank my colleagues for having worked in solidarity. And for me, as the Premier of Alberta, the presence of these premiers here during Stampede reinforces that Alberta has friends and allies across the country. And that's important because we've been going through some tough years, and I want Albertans to understand that we are not isolated, that we have allies, including other premiers who could not make it to this meeting, but who share our desire for a prosperous economy and a fair deal in the Federation. I'll say a brief summary of that in French, and then we'll be happy to take your questions. J'accueille mes homologues de plusieurs provinces et territoires ici en Alberta pour le Stampede, pour célébrer notre patrimoine de l'Ouest. Et en avance du Conseil de la Fédération Saskatoon qui commence ce soir sous la présidence de Saskatchewan. Nos discussions ce matin étaient axées sur la croissance économique et les créations d'emplois. Comment nous pouvons être les partenaires dans la prospérité. En particulier, comment on peut envoyer les ressources naturelles du Canada aux marchés internationaux, y compris l'énergie, le pétrole qui est produit au Canada. Et comment on peut coopérer sur un élargissement de commerce domestique au Canada pour éliminer les barrières au commerce interne et le mouvement des travailleurs, des professionnels. Alors, ils étaient les très bonnes discussions avant le Conseil de la Fédération et nous avons hâte à répondre à vos questions. We're happy to respond to your questions.
Just a quick...
What responsibility do you take for the appointments linked to French? Given that you're chief of staff in your office?
You know, I think I addressed that pretty quickly. As a matter of fact, I addressed that immediately when we're in Toronto. But my friends, we aren't here to talk about Dean French. You know, we're here. We're here, and I just addressed that. We're here to talk about internal trade. This is the first opportunity this country's ever seen in recent memory that from coast to coast, from the east to the west, we have like-minded premiers that want their provinces to thrive. This is incredible for the entire nation. It's incredible that we can sit down again with like-minded premiers and knock down the barriers of trade and make sure that this province of Alberta, Ontario, and the rest of the provinces thrive. And what I always said, I said to Jason Kenney, and first of all, I want to thank the Premier for inviting us here. The people of Alberta are absolutely incredible. When Alberta does well in the energy file, the whole country does well. And that's what we have to focus on. We have to focus on unleashing businesses, getting government out of the way, cutting red tape, cutting regulations. Right now in Ontario, our economy's on fire. It's thriving. We're short for the first time. Even though we inherited an absolute financial mess, our economy is thriving. We created 187,000 jobs in a year. We need over 200,000 more people in Ontario to fill the jobs. We have a labor shortage, actually, in Ontario. And we're going to work hand in hand, each premier, to share best practices. We have the greatest country in the world. We can compete against anyone in the entire world. And again, first time in recent memory, we have like-minded premiers, and we're going to support each other. And I have a message for the people of Alberta. Ontario has your back.
Sorry, but what does it say about your office that this happened under your watch? You may not want to talk about Dean French, but
well, I know in the media you want to get into the weeds. Do you really think when I walk down the street in Alberta, people worry about Dean French? Do you think they worry about anything? Do you know what they worry about? They worry about a job. They worry about how Alberta was destroyed by the previous administration. And thank God we have Premier Kenney here to turn the corner, similar to Ontario. In Ontario, we have the largest we still have the largest sub-sovereign debt in the world, $347 billion. We had $15 billion deficit that we inherited. That's what the people of Ontario worry about. They don't worry about the stuff that the media worries about. They worry about, can they put food on their table? Can they pay the mortgage? And right now, our economy is booming. We passed 20 pieces of legislation in less than a year. It's unheard of. It's unheard of. Great legislation, fixing healthcare, fixing education.
Tom Braid.
Premier Ford, when you refer to these 10 collaborative premiers coast to coast, does that include the guy in BC?
Well, we look forward to working with Premier Hogarth. We really, Horgan, sorry, Premier Horgan. I apologize. Premier Horgan. I met him last year. John's a great guy, and we're going to work with him because he understands when the rest of the country booms, BC will boom. And we look forward to working with the Premier.
If I throw something in on that, we had pretty constructive discussions with Premier Horgan at the Western Premiers Conference 2 weeks ago. And I was very pleased that he signed on to our communique language about the need for economic corridors, including to move Canadian energy. So I think we can continue to work with Premier Horgan. He's certainly in favor of LNG exports, but he knows what our position is on oil very clearly. We invited a number of premiers. Some others couldn't make it for scheduling reasons, but we'll all be meeting up tonight in Saskatoon at the Council of the Federation. This was just a brief and fairly informal get-together of some like-minded premiers to talk about jobs, growth, and prosperity. But we hope that we'll be able to have fruitful discussions with all of our colleagues starting tonight under Premier Moe's chairmanship. We were focused on people who support responsible resource development, pipelines, corridors, and are concerned about the carbon tax, and that's the vast majority of premiers.
Mr. Moe, is this the conservative tone you want to set for the Council of Federation?
Well, with respect to the conversation that we were able to have here today, and I guess first and foremost, I would like to thank Premier Kenney for the invitation to come to Stampede. I have understood for years and heard that the pancakes at the Premier's breakfast are divine, and I I can attest that they most certainly are. And so we had a great opportunity to experience the Stampede itself yesterday, as well as to converse with many people that used to live in Saskatchewan, as it turns out. But our industries do operate across borders as well. There's many industries, many businesses that are operating in our province that ultimately are headquartered out of Calgary and other places across the nation. With respect to entering into the Council of Federation and this meeting here today, this is an important piece of engagement. And as I said, our industries operate across our provincial borders, which really begs the engagement that we have at this meeting, and we had a couple of weeks ago at the Western Canadian, Western and Northern Premiers meeting in Edmonton. We need to continue to advocate to have these tables of discussion. In Canada, we have great diversity when you look at how we generate wealth in our communities from coast to coast to coast. At the subgroups, to sit at the national premiers table, if you will, which will begin this evening in Saskatoon, to continue to have those conversations around how we can continue to generate wealth in our communities, in our jurisdictions across this nation. So as we move forward, we were thrilled, I was thrilled as a Premier of Saskatchewan to participate in this meeting today. I was thrilled a couple of weeks ago to participate in the Western and Northern Premiers meeting. Thrilled to chair and host the Council of Federation meeting starting this evening, and we'll advocate for more of these tables across the nation, if you will. A number of premiers coming together to talk about areas of interest that we have, as we have energy resources that we've talked about that are being produced in Alberta and Saskatchewan. We've been fierce advocates to be able to transport those energy resources to a place like St. John, New Brunswick, where they can add value to that product, provide it to other Canadians, and provide it to other people around the world. Provide them with some of the most sustainable energy product that is produced in the world. So those are some of the discussions that ultimately we'll have at this table with Premier Higgs involved. There will be other trade-related discussions that we would have at different tables that we would have across the nation. So this isn't an ideological table that we're sitting at. This is a table of mutual interest on how we can continue to create wealth in the communities that we represent.
It comes from Premier Ford that's exactly what this is. This is to bring like-minded people together to talk before the Premier's Conference.
Like-minded people that want to advocate for the growth of our economy, the growth of our jobs in our communities, and the growth of creating the accessibility to the sustainable resources, whether it's energy, whether it's agri-food products, whether it's automobiles that are produced in Ontario, to create the opportunity for the rest of the world to access those high-quality, competitively priced, very sustainably produced, manufactured and produced goods that we have.
Do you have any concern that this is going to set up a two-party kind of thing in Saskatoon, that you're going to be like-minded and not like-minded?
No, not at all. This is not about parties. This is about prosperity. These are some of the premiers, the vast majority of whom have common concerns and interests about economic growth, job creation, responsible resource development. I want to remind you, it was 9 of the 10 provincial premiers, in addition to Premier McLeod of the Territories. You had 10 of 13 premiers expressing concern about Bills C-48 and C-69. You've got a majority of provinces representing a majority of the population concerned about the imposition of a federal carbon tax. You've got, I think we're very, well, we'll see the actual number in Saskatoon, but I think we've got the overwhelming majority of provinces in favor of the idea of energy and economic corridors across the country. You've got so a growing coalition of provinces and territories, not all represented here this morning, who share common goals for their citizens, which is jobs and prosperity, responsible resource development, partnerships and prosperity. And well, this is an informal chance to gather. In advance, we continued with some of the discussions we had at the Western Premiers Conference. I know my colleagues in New Brunswick, in Ontario, in Eastern and Central Canada are interested, for example, in how we work the New West Partnership Agreement for trade. So, and we have down east, a province that wants to get Alberta energy, and a central Canadian province that's willing to help us ship it. So we have some common interests that we were able to discuss, while also enjoying some Western hospitality, and I'm so glad that these colleagues took the time to do so.
An unrelated follow-up, please. Why did you make a decision to not ban conversion therapy provincially and leave it up to municipalities to do so?
Our position on that is exactly the same as the NDP's was. They were in office for 4 years, and so our position is the same as the NDP's.
We're going to go to the phones. Wait, sorry, we're going to go to the phones. Operator, can you please put through the first caller?
The first question is from Lucas Meyer with News Talk 1010. Lucas, your line is now open.
Thank you for taking my question. Happy Stampede, everyone.
Thanks, Lucas.
Premier Ford, the reason why we're asking these questions is because you did not take questions on them last week. So I just wanted to get clarity on one thing with Dean French. Initially, the government said that he resigned, but then last week, 2 of your ministers said that you, quote, took action when the revelations were revealed. So just to be clear, did he actually resign, or did you fire him or ask for his resignation?
Well, let's be very clear. Dean French is no longer there. We changed our chief of staff. Jamie Wallace is our chief of staff. He's a great chief. I think the cabinet gets along quite well with him. So does the caucus. We're moving forward, and my goal here, my goal is to focus on our economy, not about getting into the weeds and what the media likes to do, probably 99% of the time. Again, the people that listen to News Talk 1010, Lucas, don't worry about that. Do you know what they worry about? They worry about if the economy's going. They worry that the previous government left us with a $347 billion debt. They worry about the previous government losing 300,000 jobs. Our government has put in policies for the people of Ontario to thrive and prosper and companies to grow. We've cut red tape and regulations by 25% by 2020. Our economy's on fire. We're leading the nation in economic growth right now. And now we have the opportunity, as you've seen, a clean sweep almost right across this country, blue, 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 every single election. This is a great opportunity for the nation. Not just Ontario, for everyone in this country. We have the greatest country in the world. My friends, south of the border, we do over $300 billion of trade. We're number one trading partner to 19 states, number 2 to 9 other states. They're becoming competitive. They're lowering their corporate tax rate. They did, down to 21%. They're cutting red tape regulations. That's who we're competing against. I've met over 25 governors. They want to do trade. Open trade, free trade, and that's what we're trying to do here in Ontario, right across the country, I should say. $50 billion, it would go right down the GDP. It's $50 billion to $120 billion. That goes 4%, right down to the GDP. That's better than any USMCA deal there is. Let's start focusing on our own country.
We'll go back to the floor. Go ahead, Rick.
What message are you trying to send to Trudeau and his government by having this meeting where you have common cause on so many issues? What messages are you trying to tell the federal government by having this meeting? Or what should they get? What should they get from viewing this meeting today?
The message of this meeting for ordinary working people is that there are a lot of provincial governments trying to create jobs, growth, and prosperity. This is not about the Prime Minister. A number of us have differences of opinion, strong differences of opinion with the direction of the federal government and the way it's damaged particular resource industries. And we've expressed those differences with our, for example, the joint letter on Bills C-68 and C-48 and C-69, which was signed by all of the premiers at this table. Many of us have differences with the federal government on the carbon tax, which we talked about today. I think that my hope is that the current federal government returns to its initial promise of a cooperative approach to federalism. None of us, nor do our citizens, appreciate a message that it's either Ottawa's way or the highway. A lot of us, I think all provinces and territories at this table have been prepared to work with Ottawa on reducing carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions and constructive solutions, for example, to the challenge of climate change, but in a way that does not impair economic growth. So rather than threats, we would prefer cooperation. And I think that's certainly Alberta's view on this. Premier Moe?
Absolutely. I would just add to that, this meeting here today, and you'll see other meetings similar to this across the nation, and I'm going to dare say in the months ahead, of premiers advocating on, and disagreeing from time to time on topics, but, this meeting here today is advocating on behalf of the people that we represent in our respective jurisdictions and the jobs and the industries ultimately that they work in. We talked about, trade, both international trade, and is there opportunities for provincial jurisdictions to advocate alongside and with our federal government, with our international trading partners, and we are all selling products and goods to other nations around the world. We also talked about internal trade, the CFTA that we had moved forward. That was largely modeled after the New West Partnership, of which you have 2 of the 4 partners of the New West Partnership here today. And is there opportunities for us to move forward on platforms such as that, on our internal trade conversation? And we'll be having more in-depth and broader conversations in the couple of days ahead at the Council of Federation. But let's face it, there are a number of headwinds that are coming to the tax and regulatory structure that we are operating in many of our industries, not just specific to Western Canada. Premier Higgs would most certainly add that he's being affected at the refinery end as well, with most notably the most recent natural gas regulations that came out. But we talk. Premier Kenney had said 10 of 13 provinces had intervened with respect to C-69 and the challenges that would pose to the wealth-creating industries in their jurisdictions, the C-48, the West Coast tanker bill that has been put forward. These are all challenges that we are facing in our industries that are creating wealth. Most notable among those is the carbon taxation policy that the federal government has put forward, and we had a split decision in the province of Saskatchewan recently. We are taking that forward. We're taking that forward to the Supreme Court of Canada. We saw an intervention announcement here this morning in Quebec, also believes this is an infringement in provincial jurisdiction, of which we also believe the federal government is in an area that isn't theirs to ultimately operate. There's a variance of opinions across the nation, but the fact of the matter is we are going to come together with our ministers of justice in the weeks ahead to ensure that we are going to be putting forward the best presentation to the Supreme Court, and those that are intervening will be invited to come together to collaborate to ensure that we are putting forward the strongest case possible to the Supreme Court of Canada on behalf of the industries and the people that we represent that are working and earning their family incomes in just such industries.
I just wanted to correct myself. I said the joint letter was on C-69 and C-48. It was only on C-69. Right. The No More Pipelines law, I fused the 2 issues together in my own mind, but the C-48 primarily, or exclusively affects Alberta, so I shouldn't have spoken for other provinces. En français, oui.
We have time.
D'une part, qu'est-ce que ça veut dire de vous voir tous les 5 comme ça en conférence de presse? Quel message vous envoyez au gouvernement fédéral de Justin Trudeau? Et est-ce que ça peut nuire à Andrew Scheer?
Écoutez, aujourd'hui, ce n'est pas une question des politiques électorales du fédéral, c'est une question des politiques de croissance économique que nous partageons comme province et territoire. Il y a une majorité des provinces qui préfèrent les politiques de pro-croissance pour la création d'emplois, pour le développement responsable des ressources naturelles, pour les corridors des ressources et contre la taxe sur le carbone. Alors, nous mettons l'accent sur les enjeux, pas sur les personnalités ni les politiques électorales. Ça envoie pour moi un message important aux Albertains que nous avons les alliés partout au Canada pour le développement responsable des ressources naturelles. Je suis très reconnaissant du position, par exemple, de M. Higgs et autres premiers ministres de région atlantique en faveur d'un oléoduc à l'est du Canada. Je suis très reconnaissant de position du premier ministre Ford en faveur de l'énergie East ou les projets semblables. Alors, c'est un entretien constructif sur ces questions urgentes au plan économique. Ce n'est pas une ingérence dans les politiques fédérales.
One more. We have time for one more question.
L'Ontario et la Saskatchewan qui ont perdu récemment leur cause devant les tribunaux dans le dossier de la taxe sur le carbone. Ce matin, on apprenait que le Québec, vous l'avez mentionné, M. Moore, que le Québec allait se joindre dans la cause de la Saskatchewan en Cour suprême. À quel point êtes-vous confiant de remporter votre cause en Alberta, étant donné l'échec des deux autres provinces?
On a décidé d'avoir nos ministres de justice à discuter les stratégies quant aux efforts, des contestations, excusez-moi, sur les contestations judiciaires de taxes sur le carbone du fédéral. Nous autres, en Alberta, nous croyons que nous avons un bon argument à faire, particulièrement quand on considère le tarif que nous imposerons sur les grands émetteurs.
What is you talked about getting along with Ottawa. What's the relationship of the like-minded individuals that you talk about here with Mr. Scheer? If the PCs form government, you'll have to work with them. Obviously, you might be a little closer on the same page, but it's not. I mean, it's not you're not parallel here. So what's that relationship like?
Well, not every province nor every party agrees with everybody all the time, but there's a fairly broad agreement here about the need for policies that create good-paying jobs, in part through responsible resource development, getting our resources to global markets and defending taxpayers. And so it's only natural that we would compare notes on some of those points. We are also, the folks here and many of our other colleagues will be seen in Saskatoon, really want to move from talk to action on internal trade and labor mobility within Canada. So there's a lot of common interests. And I said to Prime Minister Trudeau when we spoke the day after my election and in Ottawa, and when we met in Ottawa a week later, that after I was sworn in, that I hope we can find common ground. Unfortunately, his government decided to proceed with two bills that have an absolutely devastating impact to this province, Bills C-69 and C-48. Instead of meeting us halfway on an approach to the climate change challenge, we're being dictated to by Ottawa. This is not the cooperative federalism that he promised in 2015. And so speaking for Alberta, I know Albertans would strongly prefer a federal government that listens to and respects the provinces, and a government that is not damaging jobs, growth, and investment through policies like this. And that's one of the, I think that's certainly Alberta's view.
One more time.
Excuse me, if I could answer your question. In the Northwest Territories, we have consensus government, so it's in our interest to make sure we know what every party will be making available for the Northwest Territories. So we try to stay in good terms with all of the federal political parties. So, and each of us are unique. We are supporting a carbon tax. We're trying to get it through, or carbon pricing. We're trying to get it through our legislative assembly, and we're part of this group because we're very concerned about the loss of jobs, the investment, the level of investment that's dropped significantly in the Northwest Territories, and the fact that our population is declining. So we know that if the energy industry in Canada doesn't recover, we're going to be in trouble. So we are working with all of our southern provinces to move ahead.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to have to leave it there.
I just could add a point. Just as Bob has supported us on the concerns around C-69 and the tanker ban, we've supported Bob, whose territory was sideswiped by the imposition of a federal moratorium on oil and gas exploration in his territory without territorial consultation. So these are the kind of issues where we, I think, have common cause.
The Premier Higgs.
I mean, you are probably seeing it firsthand more than any other area in Canada, climate change and the impacts from it. So how are you balancing that concern with the concerns that you're talking about here?
Well, you hit the nail right on the head. We are, in the territories, we are the most affected by climate change, yet we contribute the least amount of greenhouse gases. So I've said it many times, we are making a concerted effort to educate Southern Canadians like yourself, who probably are not as affected on a daily basis by climate change. And we know it's in our interest to make sure that you all understand that what your lifestyle affects us, and we have a right, we live up there, and we have a right to make a living. We ask our children to go to school, and then when they come back, we have keep our end of the bargain, that there be jobs and opportunities for them. We don't keep our end of the bargaining by moving out and having, say, move south to make a living, so.
You know, I'd like to add to that, because in New Brunswick, we've had a couple of years now consecutive record flooding situations. And I'd like to say that, you know, in this group here, and in any group across the country, none of us are denying climate is changing dramatically in Canada and throughout the world. So, and every one of us are focused on meeting our mission targets. The only strategic difference here is that we believe that we can do so, and we are meeting those targets, but not through taxing people more, but through innovation, that energy pays for innovation. We believe we're in the middle of a transition economy here, where we need to work in order to invest and see innovation start to move us to the next generation. Is the climate going to improve next year if we raise a carbon tax? No, it's not going to change. It took a long time to get here. But all of a sudden, there's this will by the current government to just tax people more and think it'll get better because everyone will feel like I'm paying a guilty tax here. We all are focused on emission reductions, every one of us. In New Brunswick, we're at 28% of our 30% target for 2030. So we're almost there now. And we've put together an output-based pricing model that meets the federal requirements, but yet they have not accepted it. And they haven't accepted it because they want us to impact people every day in their lives by paying more to get through a province that doesn't have rural transportation, doesn't have the large urban centers, but has an opportunity to continue to thrive and survive. We have the largest refinery in the country that can't get access to Canadian crude. We have a system here that we are not united as provinces to grow our country the way it's always been strong. Innovation will be funded by energy development and using what we have in our country to make it work. And I'm proud to be part of a team that's standing up for a united Canada, once again working from coast to coast to make it happen. And it's unfortunate we have these strategic blocks. And in New Brunswick, I feel like a stranded asset most times. And that's why I'm here. And I've been excited to be part of this team. And I'm excited to think that Canada's going to be on the move once again in the near future.
With that, ladies and gentlemen, we're out of time.
Thanks very much, folks. Appreciate it.
Have a good one. Thanks.